Welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha, a podcast shared by David Roylance. This podcast is dedicated to guiding you to completely eliminate the discontent mind and the suffering it causes by attaining enlightenment. Learn and practice the teachings of Gotama Buddha that will guide you to fully attain a peaceful, calm, serene, and content mind with joy. To support this podcast, visit patreon.com/support Buddha or visit buddhadailywisdom.com, where you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online learning resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Now, here's our teacher to share more.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started this morning by just welcoming all of you guys. Welcome to Watang Yu, Sawadee Krap. Welcome to everyone at the temple. Welcome to everyone who's joining us online as well, whether you're joining in Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom. I'd like to welcome all of you guys and invite you to join for our class today, where I'm going to be starting off with meditation, guiding you guys in a breathing mindfulness meditation session. And then afterwards, we're going to be moving into today's topic, which is chapter 24 of our book, Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Enlightenment. This is volume 1 of our book series. And in this chapter, it's titled Misunderstandings of Gotama Buddha's Teachings. Over the last 7 months, I've been guiding students through the group learning program, helping them to establish a foundation in the path to enlightenment. And now, here towards the end of the group learning program, because we're going to be restarting it on October 20th, I have this chapter 24, which is titled Misunderstandings of the Teachings of the Buddha. And in this chapter, we're going to go through several things that in the world, oftentimes there's misunderstandings around his teachings. And I'm going to show you in a way that you can learn the teachings, you can examine them, you can investigate them, you can reflect on them to independently verify whether they're true or false, and you can practice them in order to train your mind and move it to this enlightened mental state where the mind is peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. So again, welcome to everyone. If you'd like to join for meditation, you might have a cushion or a chair or making yourself comfortable. There's actually 4 positions to meditate in. There's seated, lying, standing, and walking. Oftentimes when people are learning online, the seated position works out really well, as does the lying and standing position. I teach all 4 of these positions, including the walking position, at different times during the various courses and retreats that I share. But let me give you some guidance on the seated position to be able to help you understand this. Oftentimes people have a cushion under their rear with their legs lightly crossed, and some people even like to put their legs off the mat. This helps get the hips up in the air, and it lessens the angle at the hips, the knees, and the ankles, allowing the circulation to flow. But you can really sit however you like. It's whatever's comfortable for you. There's not just one fixed position to meditate in. With your hands in your arms, the Buddha put his right hand over his left with his thumbs together, and he put this into his lap. If that's comfortable for you, you could use that. But again, there's other options here because it's not about everybody doing it exactly the same way. Some people like to put their palms on their thighs or on their knees. Some people put their palms up. Some people just rest their hands comfortably in their lap. So you can find whatever's comfortable for you. Some people like to use chairs. You're welcome to use a chair, or maybe if you're at home, you're on a sofa or in a wheelchair or something like this. Oftentimes having your feet flat on the floor or lightly crossed at the ankles works really well. But there's other ways to do this as well. And then again, you can have your hands in your arms in whatever way is comfortable for you. The upper body should be erect. This keeps the mind attentive and alert during the meditation, where when the sternum's up and the shoulders back, it keeps the mind attentive and alert during the meditation. And it also allows you to breathe in naturally through the nose and exhaling out through the nose. I'm going to start us with some chanting to ease us into meditation. If you would like to join along in the chanting, you're more than welcome to. Students oftentimes are interested in chanting. The chants at the temple are over there on the table by the bulletin board. You guys can see them over there behind you, over to your left. There's a chanting sheet where you can chant along if you like. And the chants are in the Pali language. This is the language of the historical teachings of the Buddha. And you'll see the English translations for these chants as well. If you read those English translations, you're going to see a lot of admiration and appreciation and gratitude and respect for the Buddha. And because of this, I don't think that the Buddha actually created these chants himself, because a Buddha, and surely an enlightened being, just an average enlightened being, would have eliminated their ego and their arrogance and their pride, their measuring and comparing, putting themselves above people or below people. So the Buddha wouldn't have created chants and given that to his students as a way to chant to him and respect him. But if you learn from a teacher of how to move from the anger and sadness, the frustration, the agitation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, all these discontent feelings, and the teacher was guiding you towards this enlightened mental state where your mind could be peaceful and joyful permanently, you'd probably have a lot of respect and gratitude for that person too. Because the Buddha didn't want anything from his students. He didn't expect anything from his students. He just shared the teachings of what it took to be able to get to enlightenment. So if you'd like to chant along, you're more than welcome to. The reason why I chant is because it helps ease the mind in the meditation and it gets more benefit out of the meditation itself. It's important to know that these aren't a rite, a ritual, or a ceremony or worship. This isn't prayer or anything like that. There isn't anything mystical or magical that is occurring when you're actually chanting. During the lifetime of the Buddha, they used chanting as a way to commit the teachings to memory because everything he taught was oral. So as he was teaching, the students every 2 weeks would come together and they would recite his teachings word for word as a way to commit them to their memory. So nowadays, we don't need to chant in order to commit the teachings to memory. We have books, audiobooks, videos, podcasts, all these different ways to capture the teachings. So we don't need to chant in order to remember the teachings, but it does help to build awareness of the mind and awareness of the breath as you ease the mind in the meditation. So if you'd like to join along in the chanting, you're more than welcome to. After the chanting, I'm going to come in with some guidance and guiding you in doing meditation. Then there's going to be a period of time where it's just quiet. You're going to see that we're just all meditating together. Those of us that are at the temple, everyone who's online, whether you're in Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or even if you're watching this on the replay, you can be meditating with us. So after that period of time where we're just meditating, we'll come out of the meditation with some more chanting as well. And for those of you guys online, if you'd like to get access to this chanting sheet, you can go to buddhadailywisdom.com. From there, click on free books, and down towards the bottom, you'll be able to see the chanting sheet that it's there for you. So if you'd like to join along, you're more than welcome. As I mentioned, I'll do some chanting, then I'll come back in with some guidance for you. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Hotang Bhagavanhang Abhivateyami Savakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Bhagavato Sāvaka Saṅkho Saṅghang Namami Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Rasa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti pisu Bhagava Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vicacaranang Sammuno Sakatoro Kawitu Anutero Purisa Dhamma Sati Satatawa Manusanang attain. Okay, with the lower body and hands and arms comfortable, and the upper body erect, just close the eyes and start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Here you're just looking to establish the breath, a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath, not forced or controlled, just a gradual inhale through the nose, experiencing the full breath. And then, whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. Your breath may not match up with the guidance that I'm providing, and that's okay. This is your practice. I'm just here for guidance. You can use this voice as a reminder that whenever you get to the next inhale, breathing gradually through the nose, developing a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. And then, whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose, experiencing the full breath. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the breath well established, start fixating the mind on the breath, either the sound of the breath coming into the nose or the sensation of air moving over the skin into the nose. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind on the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the mind fixated on the breath, whenever you notice that it moves off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. No need to observe the thought, label it, judge it, analyze it, or even try to figure out where it's coming from. Whenever you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. I'm going to be quiet now and let you do this work of focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. You have nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. No one needs you right now. This is your time to focus on the breath. Breathing in อะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธมะคะวาพุทธังมะคะวันหังอภิวาเทมิสวากขาโตมหะคะวะตาธัมโมธัมมังนามัสสามิสุปฏิปันโนมหะคะวะโตสาวกสังโฆสังฆังนามามินะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสมะคะวะอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิจาจารณังสัมมุโนสคาโตโรกาวิตุอนุเตโรปุริสาดามาสติสตาตาวามานุสนังโอโตภาควาติ If you guys would like to gradually ease your way out of meditation, again, welcome to everyone. Nice to see all of you guys there at the temple. Nice to see everyone else online as well. Welcome to our class today. Today's class is helping you to understand misunderstandings of Gotama Buddha's teachings. Now that we've done our meditation, I'm going to move into the topic that I have planned to discuss today, which is based on the book, Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Enlightenment. Each Sunday and Wednesday, I walk students through all the foundational teachings that you need in order to get to enlightenment. In volume 1 of our book series, we go chapter by chapter each Sunday. And we're coming to the end of this iteration of the group learning program. We're going to be restarting it from the very beginning on October 20th. And typically I'm at the temple there on Sunday mornings. And then on Sunday evening, I'm teaching from my home. And then what I do is I live stream it in the mornings and the evenings. So no matter where you are in the world, there's typically a live class available for you, either 9 a.m. Thai time or 9 p.m. Thai time. And where you can't attend the live class, there's recordings on YouTube, Facebook, and our podcast to be able to digest the content. Because what you can slowly do is build up your life practice where you're training the mind to get to this enlightened mental state. What enlightenment is where the mind is peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. The mind is permanently in that mental state. You no longer experience any discontent feeling. So the Buddha is guiding you to eliminate anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy. By the time you train your mind to get to enlightenment, you won't even have the slightest displeasure in the mind. And this is occurring through training of the mind, through cultivating wisdom, through learning teachings, examining them and investigating them, through reflecting on them to independently verify whether they're true or they're false, and then practicing them, integrating them into your life so that on a day-to-day basis, you're actually training your mind. So by the time you get to enlightenment, your personal professional relationships are really blossoming. They're at ease because you're no longer being bitter and harsh and hostile and resentful in your relationships. You'll notice that you don't even have a bad mood anymore. There's going to be focus, concentration, clarity, and deep memory in the mind. And what I've been doing over the last 7 months is guiding students in how to develop this life practice on the journey to enlightenment and how to train your mind and move it to this enlightened mental state. And the teachings of the Buddha, they're not based on any beliefs. So you don't believe a bunch of things and then hope something good happens when you die. That's not the way his teachings are. They're also not rules or commandments or things like this that everybody's being forced to follow. He's not explaining to you the way the world should be. And if everybody follows certain rules and commandments, the world will become a peaceful place. Instead, he's sharing with you the way the world is. Because when your mind is experiencing anger, sadness, and frustration, and any of these other discontent feelings, the mind is struggling. It's having difficulties. It just doesn't understand what it doesn't understand. It doesn't understand the world around you. So oftentimes when the mind is experiencing discontentedness, the unenlightened mind will look for somebody else to blame. The mind is looking for who caused me to be angry. What the Buddhist teachings bring your mind to understand is that it's your own mind that's causing these discontent feelings. And because your own mind is causing these feelings, you can actually eliminate them. If we just continue to blame other people for the feelings that you experience, you'll never actually get liberated or free from these strong feelings. Because when the mind gets what it wants, when its cravings, desires, attachments are being fulfilled, you'll get happy, excited, elated. But then when you don't get what you want, you'll be angry or frustrated or sad or some other discontent feeling. So it's the mind's craving, desire, attachment, the longing, the yearning, the wanting, the expectations that is causing the mind to go up and down and up and down. So the Buddha is providing this path to be able to help you independently verify this and be able to train your mind to eliminate the causes and conditions that are producing these feelings. So what I'm sharing here with you, you shouldn't believe what I'm sharing with you. You can actually listen to what I'm sharing, and then you can look at a recent situation where you've been angry or sad or frustrated or some other discontent feeling. Maybe at that time you were looking to blame somebody else. But if you look at that situation, whether it was this morning or yesterday or last week, where you were getting annoyed or frustrated or agitated, look at that same situation with these fresh eyes, that there was something your mind wanted. And if you would have just got what you wanted, you would have been happy, or you would have been excited, or you would have been thrilled perhaps. But because your mind didn't get what you wanted from this other person or from life, the mind experienced the anger and the sadness and the frustration. So this is just some of the basic introduction to the teachings of the Buddha. But what I'm going to be doing now is going into the misunderstandings of the teachings of the Buddha. Because over the last 7 months, I've been sharing with students all the foundational teachings that it takes to be able to get to enlightenment. And as you have been learning, for those of you guys that have been learning with me all that time, you've been learning how to train your mind and move it to enlightenment. And you've been learning what the teachings are that the Buddha actually shared that leads to enlightenment. But now at the end of the book, this chapter 24, I'm sharing with you the misunderstandings, because you're going to see a litany of misunderstandings in the world related to the teachings of the Buddha. People are attributing certain things to the Buddha that aren't actually his teachings. So as we go in our class today, you're welcome to ask any and all questions that you like. For those of you guys that are at the temple, we have microphones there. If you can just get a microphone from the white bowl, or if there's one around you, you can just press the gray button. There's going to be some lights that come on. Just wait a second or so and put it up to your chin, and we'll be able to hear you all throughout all the platforms that we're live streaming to. And for those of you guys that are on Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, if you have questions, you can put that into the comment section, and I'll be able to see that. Or those of you guys in Zoom, you can electronically raise your hand and ask any and all questions that you like. So I'm going to start off with sharing with you guys the landscape of Buddhism within the world, so you can understand where some of these misunderstandings are coming from. There's essentially 3 main traditions of Buddhist teachings, and these different traditions are spread out throughout the world. There's one tradition called Theravada Buddhism. This means the teachings of the elders. This is considered to be the form of Buddhist teachings that is closest to what the Buddha actually taught during his lifetime. And it's referred to as Theravada because that means teachings of the elders. In this particular tradition, we look to the Pali Canon, which is the original source teachings of the Buddha. The Pali Canon is 45 large volumes of books that are about this thick, and this is what we have left remaining from the collection of teachings that the Buddha actually taught. This particular tradition of Buddhist teachings is oftentimes practiced and taught in South and Southeast Asia. So places like Sri Lanka, Myanmar, Cambodia, Laos, Thailand, and southern Vietnam. But in reality, this has been spread all throughout the world, that it's not just these places that are actually hosting these teachings. You'll see them all over the world. And sometimes people refer to this as the lesser vehicle or Hinayana. And this is kind of a derogatory way of thinking about this, because the idea of having a lesser vehicle or a greater vehicle or a lightning fast vehicle, this is a misunderstanding of what it takes to get to enlightenment. You can't quickly get to enlightenment. It's not possible. So some people refer to this in a derogatory way. And sometimes those are individuals who either just aren't knowing that this is a derogatory way, or they might be part of another tradition and thinking that that tradition is what the Buddha actually taught. But later, after the Buddha's death, he died in 483 BCE. About 500 to 1,000 years later, there's a different tradition of Buddhism that spawns. It's called Mahayana Buddhism. And this is practiced primarily in East Asia. You'll see this in China a lot. But again, it's been spread out all throughout the world. You'll see it in northern Vietnam. You'll see it all throughout the world. And in this particular tradition, they've actually changed and modified the teachings because the Buddha taught an oral tradition. Nothing got written down during his lifetime. So it's very easy for an oral tradition to be modified due to impermanence, either overtly modified or maybe inadvertently modified, because people's memories weren't quite what they needed to be in order to preserve the teachings. But ultimately, it's the Pali Canon that preserves his teachings. But this Mahayana tradition, you'll see various rites and rituals and ceremonies. You'll see various prayers and worship and things like this that is going on in this tradition. And the Buddha never taught any rites, rituals, ceremonies, or worship. He didn't teach those kinds of things because that's not what leads to wisdom. That's not what leads to cultivation of the mind. So whenever you see rites, rituals, ceremonies, or worship or prayer, anything like that, that's associated with the teachings of the Buddha, you can be assured that the Buddha didn't actually teach those things. But you might see them from time to time if you're navigating throughout the Mahayana tradition. And the Mahayana tradition has multiple branches as well. You might have heard of Zen Buddhism or other types of things like this. Then there's something called Vajrayana Buddhism, which comes about 1,000 years after the death of the Buddha. And this is the Buddhism that they practice primarily in Tibet, Bhutan, Mongolia, and the Russian Republic of Kalmykia. And again, this is spread all throughout the world. You'll see that this particular tradition has a lot of rites and rituals and ceremonies and worship. There's deities and prayer and these kinds of things. And the Buddha never taught any of these kinds of things, but you'll see these in this particular tradition. And as I mentioned, sometimes people refer to this as the lesser vehicle, the greater vehicle, and the lightning fast vehicle. But there's nothing about getting to enlightenment that's lightning fast, and you can't use prayer and worship to get to enlightenment. One of the biggest misunderstandings about the life story of the Buddha is people think he sat under a tree, he meditated, and instantly got to enlightenment. And this just isn't true. You can see in his original teachings that he talks about gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress. And he says very clearly that it wasn't instantaneous that he got to enlightenment. So this map that I'm sharing here with you guys, this is a map just to kind of show you the focal point of where the Buddha was teaching, which is what we refer to as Northeast India. And you can see those lines kind of drawn. This isn't necessarily a 100% accurate map because we know that the teachings went from that focal point down to Sri Lanka. And then from Sri Lanka, we suspect that they then made their way over to Thailand. And you can see that there's no line being drawn from Sri Lanka over to Thailand. The teachings of the Buddha came into Thailand about 800 to 1200 years ago. But when these teachings came into Thailand, it's not like they came in on a Friday and there was a countrywide announcement that said, okay, on Monday, we're going to be up and running on Buddhism 2.0. Everybody needs to cut over to Buddhism 2.0. That's not the way that this works. Instead, as the teachings were gradually making their way in, they were gradually merged in with things like Thai folk tradition and things that were already being practiced. And they was already kind of tainted with Hinduism and things like this. So today, what we see in Thailand and other places, is we see this real mixture of teachings from all these different traditions. Now, there are pockets of people in Thailand and other places of the world that are looking to study the original words of the Buddha and the original teachings of the Buddha. And that's what our community does, is we base everything that is being shared on the original words of the Buddha so that you can see what did he teach and what he didn't teach. But starting 800 to 1200 years ago, as these teachings were making their way in, there were Thai folk traditions and even animism. If you know what animism is, this is the worship of inanimate objects. So if you see like Thai people wrapping trees with garland, or maybe they're having shrines on the mountain, or maybe they're making offerings to the water spirit and things like this. While this is really beautiful to think about, like let's respect the water and the forest and these kinds of things, it's not actually what's going to lead to enlightenment. But these things kind of merged and blended in with Buddhism. And the average Thai person probably doesn't even see the difference that there is such a thing as Buddhism, Hinduism, animism, Thai folk traditions, and things like this. So from us, from the outside looking in, we can see very clearly what is Buddhism, what is Hinduism, what is folk traditions, what is animism, and things like this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus the vast majority of our talk on things that are misunderstandings within the Theravada tradition, because even within the Theravada tradition, there's a lot of misunderstandings. So if you've been learning with me for any amount of time, when I teach you that the Buddha never taught rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship, and you're learning this from me in Thailand, from the temple, or wherever I live stream, and you go visit a temple in Thailand even, one of the first things you might see is rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship. You might think, hold on a second, what is David teaching? He said there's no rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship, but yet here in Thailand, there's all these rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship. Well, at the time of the life of the Buddha, there were individuals called Brahmin. These were Hindu priests that were practicing rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship. And you would be born into this family. About 15% of society was born into this family. And now the rest of society, the other 85%, we were taught that if we wanted any kind of change or improvement in our life, we had to go to these Brahmin, we needed to pay them money, and then they would do a ceremony on our behalf, and then our life was supposed to get better. So if you had an argument with your wife or your husband, or if your children were having difficulties, or people were sick, you might go to these people, give them some money, have them do some worship or some ceremony, and your life was supposed to get better. The Buddha understood that this wasn't true. This isn't the way the world works, that there's certain causes and effects, or action and result. This is referred to as the natural law of Gama, that any decisions that you make are going to produce certain results. And if you make decisions wisely, it's going to produce wholesome results, or wholesome Gama. And if you make decisions unwisely, it's going to produce unwholesome results, or unwholesome Gama. This word Gama, if it translated as just one English word, I would use that. The word in Sanskrit is karma. You might have heard it referred to that. But in the Pali Canon, the original source text, the Buddha uses the word Gama. So I still use that word Gama because it doesn't translate to just one English word. But this isn't anything mystical or magical. It's not any being that's overseeing this and controlling this. It's not about punishments and rewards. It's not even about who's to blame or who's at fault. It's just about seeing this cause and effect, or this action and result. It's the results of our decisions. So everything that the Buddha taught was all about cultivating wisdom through understanding these natural laws. And now you make wise decisions that result in wholesome results for you. Because as I mentioned, in the unenlightened state, we oftentimes blame what we're experiencing on other people. And as long as you blame what you're experiencing on other people, you're going to continue to stay stuck in the discontentedness and the struggles and the difficulties. You need to be able to look inward and see within your own mind, what is it that's leading to any particular result that you're experiencing. And then as you cultivate this wisdom with the guidance of a teacher, you're able to then make wiser and wiser decisions that's leading to more and more wholesome results. But if you don't have wisdom of this natural law, you're going to naturally make unwise decisions that lead to unwholesome results, or unwholesome Gama. So the teachings of the Buddha are all about guiding you and understanding how to learn, how to reflect, and how to practice in order to train your mind and awaken to the wisdom of this natural law. There are no rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship. So those individuals who were Brahmin during the lifetime of the Buddha doing those rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship, they would still come to the Buddha and learn, but ultimately they were still doing things that were rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship. So today what we see is a lot of the ordained practitioners have become Brahmin. They're essentially doing rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship for the public, that the public thinks that they need to go to these people in order to get them to do a ceremony, and then that's how their life's going to get better. But you can see very clearly in the teachings of the Buddha, but this isn't actually true. So these first few things that I have to share with you are actually things in the Theravada tradition that you will see if you've been to any temples or any events, anywhere in the Theravada tradition, you might see these kinds of things. And these are rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship. And the Buddha didn't teach these. And it leaves the mind in a condition of having this unknowing of true reality, or this lack of wisdom, or this confusion. So if you understand what these things are, and you understand what the path to enlightenment is, then you can understand how these things aren't what the Buddha taught. And you can see it in his own teachings, because he actually talks about some of these things. So the first one that I'll share, and then I'm going to open up to questions after I go through all three of these, is it's called a pouring water ceremony. This might be how we translate it. In Thai, we refer to it as Wat Nam. This ceremony is essentially something that ordained practitioners will tend to do if you make them an offering. If you take them some food, clothing, or something like this, or some resource, maybe some financial support, when you give that to them, they will gesture to you to get this little urn of water in this little bowl. And what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to gradually pour this water out, and the monks will be chanting as you're pouring out this water. And the thought is that people think that when you're pouring out this water, that any good deeds that you created, any wholesome benefits that you created as a part of making that offering to the ordained practitioners, you're now transferring it to your relatives, to like your dead relatives. It's a great thought that you're sharing with other people, but you just can't do that. It's not possible to share the benefits of your offerings. Because if you understand what the offerings are doing for you, is that it's helping you to eliminate craving, desire, attachment. It's helping you eliminate the stain of selfishness, as the Buddha is explaining. That what's going on in your mind is this craving, desire, attachment, holding on to things, wanting things to be permanent. And when you're practicing generosity, you're giving and sharing without any expectation of anything in return. You're living open-handedly, and you're doing that joyfully to help other people through your time, effort, energy, and resources without any expectation of anything in return. And if you're sharing this towards the ordained community or teachers or temples that are sharing the teachings, now you're actually helping to make the teachings available for other people. So the benefits that you're receiving as part of practicing generosity is it's training your mind to eliminate craving, desire, attachment. You're eliminating selfishness. And there's just no way for you to transfer that benefit to somebody else. So this is something that's come along at different times. People have added it in, and it's just not part of what the Buddha actually taught. You can see very clearly in his teachings that he teaches the natural law of karma is that it's your decisions that lead to any particular results in life. Then there's something that we refer to in Thai as namon. Someone might translate this as blessed water or sacred water. Essentially what this is that if you're at an event where there's Buddhist stuff going on, that at some point the ordained practitioners will take this device and they'll dip it in the water and they will sprinkle it around. You might have experienced this if you went to a temple. They will sprinkle this around on the people. And it's thought that if this water hits you, that this is like sacred water or blessed water, and it's going to somehow bless you and make you feel better and do something good for your life. The Buddha actually talked about this during his lifetime because this was going on during his lifetime too. And he explained that he doesn't do this because it promotes wrong view. That the idea of thinking that you can get some water sprinkled on you and that somehow this is going to lead to better results in your life, this just isn't true. What leads to better results in your life is making wise decisions. Wise decisions are going to then lead to wholesome results or wholesome karma. And there's no amount of water that I can sprinkle on you that's going to make your life better, unless you're maybe hot and you would like a little bit of refreshing water on your face or on your head or something like this. And to do this, it requires a certain amount of ego to think that me as a person, I can somehow do something to this water to make it sacred and special. And now I can sprinkle it on people and they're going to somehow get some kind of benefit from that. This is not something that the Buddha taught, but unfortunately you'll see this practice in various places that are considered Buddhist venues. Then there's something called sai sen. This is the Thai word. We might refer to this as sacred thread. If you go and talk to an ordained practitioner or somebody like that, they might tie this string around your wrist. Some of you guys there in Thailand might actually have some of these, and that's fine. That's what you did, no worries. But now you're learning that this isn't actually part of the teachings of the Buddha. What people think is there's somehow this sacred thread, and if we tie this on your wrist, that you will actually somehow benefit from this. This is kind of coming from animism, that with animism, you see that the Thai people wrap the trees and they wrap their boats and they wrap different things. This is kind of coming from that, where it's thought that, okay, you've went and visited this monk this monk has sprinkled some water on you, they've tied this string on your wrist, and somehow this is going to make your life better. But what's going to make your life better is if you talk to the ordained practitioners, if you talk to the teachers and you ask them questions about the path to enlightenment. Ask them about how to get to enlightenment. Ask them what it is that enlightenment is. Ask them about wholesome things and wise things in the world. Because when you cultivate wisdom, then you can make wiser decisions that's going to produce wholesome results. And that's what it is that's going to actually benefit your life. Not pouring out this water, not getting water sprinkled on you, not tying this string around your wrist. That's not going to benefit your life. You need wisdom to go out into the world and make wise decisions. And that's what's going to help you in your life. So let me know if you guys have any questions here. You can ask questions by putting that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom. Or at the temple, you guys can ask questions as well. And including those of you in Zoom, just electronically raise your hand. I'll be able to see that and call on you to answer any questions that you might have. Okay, it looks like Watong Yu has a question. Go ahead.
Thank you, David. Very interesting about some of the misunderstandings. Just a simple question on sometimes we have, well, I should say I have, a tendency to want to identify something. So the whole question of, I am a Buddhist, which I don't really identify with, but yeah, that's sort of meaningless, isn't it? To say I'm a Buddhist. It's more important to learn the teachings and practice the teachings, and it's pretty much irrelevant whether you identify and say, yeah, I'm a Buddhist. Or, yeah, if you could comment just on that.
Sure. Yeah, exactly, Steve. This is something that I'm going to be talking about next week under frequently asked questions, because people sometimes ask, how do I become a Buddhist? Well, in order to get to enlightenment, you need to train your mind to not identify that way. Because if you identify with I am a Buddhist, when somebody says something like, all Buddhists are friendly and loving and kind, wow, you get these pleasant feelings. But if somebody says all Buddhists are horrible and blah, 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 they have degrading thoughts that they share, you'll get frustrated and agitated because your mind is identifying that way. So since you understand the universal truth of non-self, part of healing that away and realizing non-self is not to identify with I am a Buddhist, because the Buddha wasn't a Buddhist. That term didn't even exist during his lifetime. So if somebody identifies that way, that it's something that you just need to get rid of out of the mind and not hold on and not cling to that. As long as the mind's clinging to that, you can't get to liberation. So this I am Buddhist, it's kind of a misunderstanding. It's a frequently asked question that people ask, because who determines who is a Buddhist and who's not? Who set out the criteria of what a Buddhist is and what a Buddhist isn't, right? And this is what the unenlightened mind does, is it looks to grab onto something and identify with something, and you'd like to peel all those things away. Hey, we have a question here coming in on Facebook from Janae. She asked, what misunderstandings did you misunderstand when you started your life practice? That's what I'm sharing with you here. I used to do all of these things, a lot of these things that I'm sharing with you. I used to do all of these things. I used to even conduct these before I was in teaching in Thailand. When I was teaching back in America, I used to do a lot of these things as a receiver and as a giver as well. So that's why I have these in here, because I misunderstood them, and so do other people as well. So these are definitely misunderstandings, and you're going to learn about those through the book and through this class so that you can see some of the misunderstandings that I experienced as part of my journey to where I am today. Okay, so now we'll move on to the next three. This fourth one is related to ordained practitioners. And ordained practitioners in the original teachings of the Buddha are referred to as bhikkhus and bhikkhunis. The bhikkhus are male and the bhikkhunis are females. The Buddha ordained both males and females because everybody can get to enlightenment, and it was important to have the ordained path available for both males and females. So sometimes ordained practitioners are studying with me that they're interested in learning the path to enlightenment based on the original words of the Buddha. So I included this one in here for them, but I also included this in here for household practitioners too, because you're going to see something with the ordained practitioners that might confuse you. Because the Buddha teaches us not to judge others, don't put yourself above or below others. This is part of dissolving and eliminating the conceit, where you're not measuring and comparing people, you're not putting yourself above or below others. But all throughout history, for a significant amount of time, ordained practitioners and household practitioners, particularly in Thailand and other places too, have been propping up the ordained practitioners as if they're above household practitioners. And ordained practitioners are taught that they are above household practitioners. And oftentimes when they're first learning, they're taught not to why or show respect with their hands together and bowing to people. They're taught not to do that unless the person is ordained. Because what they think is that the household practitioners are below them and they're above those people. And now, if a household practitioner wise to an ordained practitioner, typically an ordained practitioner will just look at you. They might smile or something like that, but they typically aren't going to why back. And this is a big misunderstanding of the teachings of the Buddha. And this is hindering so many ordained practitioners from actually getting to enlightenment. Because as long as that conceit is in the mind, where their mind views themselves as being above others, this is going to hinder them from getting to enlightenment. So it's important that we understand as household practitioners, if we why to somebody, this is for your practice. It's not because you want something back from this person. So if you why to an ordained practitioner and they choose not to why you back, so be it. That's their practice. That's the conceit that they're choosing to maybe hold on to. Or maybe they just chose not to why you back for some reason or another. We're not going to judge them and say whether they're conceited or not, but this is oftentimes where this is coming from. Because it's really wise that when someone greets you and they show respect, that you do the same thing back. So if you're out and about and you're greeting people as a household practitioner and you're greeting ordained practitioners and they don't why back, it's okay. Don't crave and desire and long and yearn for others to greet you in a certain way. Remember, this is for your practice. This is humbling your mind. This is helping you to be polite, kind, friendly, and respectful. For those of you guys that are ordained practitioners and maybe you're learning with me, it's helpful to understand that you're not above household practitioners, that you are a human being just like everyone else. Putting on an orange robe and shaving your hair doesn't make you a special person. Putting on a white clothes like I wear and shaving my hair doesn't make me a special person. I'm just like everybody else. I'm equal to everybody. And I go out of my way looking for people to actually why and show respect to, because this develops your own ability to have harmonious relationships. So I've got some words of the Buddha here to be able to help you see that the Buddha taught to be humble and down to earth. This is one of his teachings. This is titled, Gain, Honor, and Praise Are an Obstacle, Even for an Arahant. An Arahant is an enlightened being. He says, monks, gain, honor, and praise, I say, are an obstacle, even for a monk who is an Arahant, one with taints destroyed. This is somebody who's actually enlightened and eliminated all the pollutions of their mind. When this was said, the Venerable Ananda, which is one of the Buddha's close students, asked the master teacher Gotama, why, Venerable Sir, are gain, honor, and praise an obstacle, even for a monk with taints destroyed? So Ananda here is like, hold on a second. If somebody's enlightened, why would gain, honor, and praise be an obstacle for them? They're already enlightened. Their mind's already peaceful. It's already been purified, right? So this is a valid question that Ananda is interested to have the Buddha teach, because sometimes when a teacher is teaching, a student doesn't necessarily understand all the time. Maybe everything isn't being communicated in the way the student needs to hear it. So asking questions to your teacher is very important. So then the Buddha goes on. He says, I do not say, Ananda, that gain, honor, and praise are an obstacle to his unshakable liberation of mind. So what he's saying is, I didn't say that someone who's enlightened, that gain, honor, and praise is an obstacle to his unshakable mind, because once you get to enlightenment, your mind's steady and stable and unshakable. There's nothing that can shake it up. He's saying, I didn't say that gain, honor, and praise is an obstacle to that, someone who's already enlightened. But I say they are an obstacle to his attainment of those peaceful dwellings in this very life, which are achieved by one who resides diligent, dedicated, and determined. So what he's saying is, gain, honor, and praise are an obstacle to your attainment of enlightenment. So that's why I share with ordained practitioners, as long as they go around thinking that they're honored and they should be praised and they're above other people, this is an obstacle to your attainment. So the Buddha gives guidance on this. He says, so dreadful, Ananda, are gain, honor, and praise, so bitter, vile, obstructive to achieving the unsurpassed security from bondage or enlightenment. Therefore, Ananda, you should train yourselves thus. We will abandon the arisen gain, honor, praise, and we will not let the arisen gain, honor, and praise persist, obsessing our mind. Thus should you train yourself. So as an individual who's on the path to enlightenment, you can't control what other people choose to do. If somebody puts you up high or they honor you and respect you, you can't control that, because that's decisions that they're making. But you can control your own mind. when people are complimenting you or complimentary, because the more enlightened you become, people are going to compliment you endlessly because you're functioning in the world more and more perfectly as you get closer and closer to enlightenment. As you're experiencing that gain, honor, and praise where people are praising you, you need to have control of your own mind to not let it obsess your mind and make yourself think that you're above other people. So that's what the Buddha is teaching you, is to abandon this and not allow it to obsess the mind. Here's another one on this same topic. This one is titled, "This spiritual life is not lived for the sake of deceiving people." Monks, this spiritual life is not lived for the sake of deceiving people and persuading them, nor for the benefit of gain, honor, and praise, nor for the benefit of winning in debates, nor with the thought, "Let the people know me thus," but rather, this spiritual life is lived for the sake of restraint, abandoning, freedom from strong feelings, and elimination. So what he's saying is, if you're going to take this path to enlightenment, it's not so that you can get this gain, honor, and praise from other people, or winning in debates, like arguments and fights, because you're going to be very knowledgeable. You're going to have a lot of wisdom about the world and the natural laws. And sometimes people like to go around and show off how much that they know. So the Buddha says, nor with the thought, "Let the people know me thus," like, look how smart I am. But rather, this spiritual life is lived to restrain the mind from its cravings, desires, attachments, training it to get to peace and joy rather than chase after the pleasant feelings. Instead, you can get to the unconditioned happiness and excitement where your mind is always happy and always joyful rather than just experiencing the temporary joy. Instead, this spiritual life is meant for the freedom of these strong feelings where the mind's going up and down and up and down. It's for the elimination of this discontentedness. It's not to show people like, look how great and wonderful I am. So this is some guidance. If you're interacting with ordained practitioners, or if you are an ordained practitioner, this will really help you. Then number 5 here is, sometimes we're taught chanting or mantras. These are things that you can learn sometimes going from place to place, as you saw that we chant as part of our community before meditation and after meditation. Sometimes when you go into a certain community, people will tell you that there's some special chant that maybe only their temple actually knows. And these special chants or mantras are going to do something special for you. Some people say, oh, chant this special chant. And if you chant this chant, you're going to get rich, or you're going to get famous, or chant this special chant. Your boyfriend or your girlfriend's going to come back to you, or chant this special chant. You're going to get this extra long life, right? There's all these different things, or chant this special chant. You'll instantly get to enlightenment. Well, I teach students, don't believe anybody, including me. Don't believe me either. Look at the truth for yourself. If you go somewhere and they say, hey, chant these chants, this is going to get you an extra long life, and it's only our temple that actually knows these chants, and you got to kind of be quiet about this. Well, if there was truly something that leads to an extra long life or wealth or getting your boyfriend or girlfriend back, don't you think that would have spread like wildfire? Like, if you just go to a restaurant and you have some good food, you're going to tell your friends and family about it, like just because they have good food. Now think about if you had this chant or this mantra that's going to instantly make you rich, or instantly bring back your boyfriend or girlfriend, or instantly create this long life for you. That would have spread like wildfire all throughout society and humanity. Everybody would know that by now. Another way that you can independently verify this is if someone says there's this special chant that gives you this extra long life and you're at a temple, look around. Do you see people that are 150, 200, 300 years old? If not, then you know that this isn't true. This is something that these people are believing. So chanting during the lifetime of the Buddha was used in order to commit the teachings to memory. That's it. That's the only reason why he did chanting, because everything he taught was oral. The language that he spoke didn't even have a script. They couldn't write things down because the technology to write things down was in China, but it wasn't in that region of the world where the Buddha is. We might not think about writing something down as technology, but that was technology 2,500 years ago and hadn't made its way to that region of the world yet. So when the Buddha would teach, he would just teach orally. And then every 2 weeks, his students would come together and they would recite his teachings in order to commit them to their memory, because that way they could actually practice the teachings. So all these chants that you see in the world where people are maybe looking at them like prayer or worship or things like this isn't what the Buddha actually taught. He taught chanting in order to commit the teachings to memory. The only reason why I do chanting, or there's actually multiple reasons, but one of the main reasons is to ease the mind down into meditation and actually get more benefit out of the meditation itself. We don't need to chant in order to commit the teachings to memory because we have books, audiobooks, videos, podcasts. We have things like this. We have lots of technology to help us. So if you see these kinds of things being discussed, it's not what the Buddha actually taught. Then you might actually see Buddha statues, particularly if you're in a Buddhist country. But you notice there in the classroom where I teach, there's no Buddha statues. The reason why is because the Buddha never taught us to create Buddha statues of him. You'll see statues all over the Buddhist world. And oftentimes people have various beliefs about these Buddha statues. They might think that the spirit of the Buddha resides in those statues. And sometimes people feed these statues and they pray to these statues and they worship these statues. Whether people choose to do that or not, it's up to them. It's their decision. That's their practice. I used to do those same kind of things as well. But slowly but surely, I gained the wisdom to realize that this isn't what leads to enlightenment. That worshiping statues or feeding statues and things like this isn't what the Buddha taught. He taught us to train our mind. But you're going to oftentimes see statues all over the world that are trying to depict what the Buddha looked like. But those statues, in the most part, don't actually even resemble what the Buddha looked like. That they usually typically portray him with a crown on his head or hair on his head, kind of these curly cues, or some people refer to them as snails. This isn't what the Buddha actually looked like. This picture that you see that I have on this visual aid and the one that's in the back of the room at the temple, this is a artwork that was commissioned based on the original teachings of the Buddha, because the Buddha describes what he looks like in his teachings. And this artist depicted what he looked like based on those descriptions of what he looked like during his lifetime. So this is what I know the Buddha to look like during his lifetime. He talks about shaving his hair. He talks about wearing a robe. He was born in what we refer to as Nepal. He taught in Northeast India. You can see that this is depicting someone that looks very much like that person. So you don't need a statue. You don't need to worship a statue. You don't need to feed a statue in order to be able to get to enlightenment. Of course, these statues can be very beautiful and they can be amazing artwork. But when the people were making these statues, none of those people actually lived during the lifetime of the Buddha. When the Buddha died in 483, it wasn't until about 200 years later that people started making statues of him. And none of those people lived during the lifetime of the Buddha. The people that were making statues of him, those people that were practicing Buddhist teachings, they came in contact with the people in Greece. And the people in Greece were creating statues of their gods. And they had various ways of creating these statues of their gods. And they believed in multiple gods. So these people that were practicing the teachings of the Buddha were thinking like, who do we have to make a statue out of? And those are the people that started making statues of what they thought that the Buddha looked like. But they didn't look to the original teachings. So that's why we have statues that don't actually resemble what the Buddha actually looked like. A Buddha isn't interested in people worshiping him or anything like this. Instead, people actually asked him during his lifetime, like, what's the best way that we can respect you? And he said, the best way to respect me is to practice the teachings. If you're practicing the teachings, this is the way to respect the teacher, right? And you can think about that not just in relationship to a Buddhist teacher, but say you have an English teacher, or say you have a teacher that teaches you about being an auto mechanic, or a carpenter, or how to put on makeup, or any of these other kind of things. Anything you've done in life, you've needed a teacher, whether it's learning to read, write, and speak English, whether it's a job or occupation or anything like this. You've had teachers that were there to help you. And the path to enlightenment is the same way, that you need teachers and guides to be able to help you along the journey. You wouldn't actually be able to get to enlightenment by yourself because only a Buddha is actually capable of doing that. So here, the Buddha statues that you see throughout the world, you'll see in different cultures, they actually resemble that culture. So if you go to China, the statues of the Buddha look very Chinese, or Japan, they look very Japanese, or in Thailand, some people say they look very Thai. But in reality, the Buddha didn't look like any of these statues. He looked like this artwork that I'm sharing with you. So if you have Buddha statues or you enjoy being around them, that's up to you. Of course, they're very beautiful to go visit different Buddha statues throughout Thailand and other places, but just understand that you don't need these things in order to get to enlightenment. And there's definitely no spirit of the Buddha there. You don't need to feed these statues. There's nothing like that that's going to actually lead to your enlightenment, because that's, again, rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship. So let me know if you guys have any questions on any of these four. Okay, it looks like Rachel has a question here in Zoom. You use the Pali Canon in your books. Have you used all the teachings? I mean, if I read all your books, well, I have also read the Pali Canon. The Pali Canon is 45 large volumes, about this big. And the reason why it's so thick is because there's lots of repetition. That you can read 100 pages and there can just be one sentence or even one word that's just changing over and over and over again. So if you read the books that I share, it's not the entire Pali Canon, but it's an extract. And I'm confident that everything that I've put together in that book series is what you need in order to get to enlightenment. That's not to say that you couldn't read other discourses that the Buddha shared, but I know that that book series, that collection of books, is what will lead to one person's enlightenment. And of course, you need guidance from a teacher. You wouldn't be able to just read those books and be able to get to enlightenment, but that's an extract of the most important discourses that you need in order to be able to learn, reflect, and practice to be able to make your way to enlightenment. But it wouldn't be the entire Pali Canon. There's very few people in the world that have read the entire Pali Canon. Okay, it looks like Janae has a question here on Facebook. She asks, are you an ordained practitioner or is being a teacher different? I'm not ordained. An ordained practitioner will go through a ceremony with 10 preceptors. They will end up living at a temple. They will end up leaving their family in order to go do that. I chose not to do that. The Buddha already set an example of what it's like to be an ordained practitioner and be able to get to enlightenment. I was interested in helping people see how to get to enlightenment as a household practitioner, because many people think that you can't actually get to enlightenment as a household practitioner. But I'm sharing with people exactly what you need to be able to do as either a household practitioner or an ordained practitioner to get to enlightenment, because the teachings are the same. It's just a matter of what lifestyle that you take. So I'm not an ordained practitioner, but I'm a teacher sharing the teachings of the Buddha. And then she asked, is making Buddhism related art an unwholesome decision? Not necessarily. It's not about the decision that you make. It's about, what's going on in your own mind. If somebody would like to make artwork that's Buddhist related, wonderful. But just be sure you understand that it's artwork, that it's not something that you absolutely need. You don't have to have a picture of the Buddha or a statue of the Buddha in order to get to enlightenment. That would be diving into this unknowing of true reality or confusion or misunderstanding. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions anywhere. So now what I'll do is I'll share the last three. And again, you guys can ask questions on these when we get to the end here. Is some people think about Gautama Buddha as a god, an avatar, or a lord. And the Buddha never describes himself that way. So it would be very unwise to refer to the Buddha in a way that he himself didn't refer to himself. He just referred to himself as a human being and a teacher. But sometimes people today think of him as a god or an avatar or a lord. If you go and look at the definition of these things, you can see that the Buddha doesn't fit any of these criteria, because a god doesn't get born through the womb of a woman. The Buddha came into the world through the womb of a woman, and a god isn't born that way. And if you look at the word Lord and what it actually means, is it means someone or something having power, authority, or influence, a master or a ruler. Or another way is you might see act in a superior and domineering manner towards someone. Well, if you know the teachings of the Buddha, even to the slightest degree, you know that this is just the opposite of what the Buddha actually taught. So some people will refer to the Buddha as Lord Buddha. And if we continue to do that, it's actually representing him in a way that isn't what he actually taught. And there's people in the world who've been taught that Jesus Christ is the only Lord and Savior. And if we refer to the Buddha as Lord Buddha, those individuals, which is over 1 billion people, immediately wouldn't approach the teachings of the Buddha because they're not interested in looking at any teachings from another person who's considering themselves a Lord. Well, the Buddha didn't refer to himself as a Lord. So if we use the actual language that the Buddha used, where he actually referred to himself most frequently as something called the Tathagata. Some people refer to him as the Buddha or Master Teacher Gotama or Master Teacher or things like this. So the Buddha isn't a Lord, but some people will refer to him that way. And it's helpful for you to not think of him as a Lord, because these teachings of the Buddha can be shared worldwide, and more we can experience peace on earth as more and more people are experiencing enlightenment. But if we refer to him as a Lord, that alienates a large section of the population who wouldn't even approach his teachings because they're looking at Jesus Christ as the only Lord and Savior, and they're not interested in anything else other than that. So this is something to keep in mind, that we can use Master Teacher Gotama, Gotama Buddha, the Buddha, things like this are all ways that the Buddha referred to himself or other people refer to him, but he never used the word Lord. Sometimes people talk about blessings related to the Buddha. They might say, may the triple gem bless you, or may the Buddha bless you. The Buddha never did any blessings during his lifetime. A blessing would be to have God's favor and protection, a prayer asking for God's favor or protection. The Buddha never taught that because it's not God who's going to protect you. It's your own decisions. It's having wisdom and making wise decisions that's going to lead to wholesome results in your life. If you make unwise decisions, it's going to lead to unwholesome results in your life. So there's no such thing as the Buddha blessing you or the triple gem blessing you or anything like that, but you might hear this from time to time. And then lastly, some people refer to an individual who gets to enlightenment as a Buddha, or they might say that you have attained Buddhahood, or they might say that you have Buddha nature. Sometimes people have misunderstood the teachings and they think that everybody is a Buddha. And this just isn't true. This isn't what the Buddha actually taught. A Buddha is an individual who's gotten to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides. They then dedicate the rest of their life to sharing their independently discovered teachings with countless people. And countless people will get to enlightenment during that person's lifetime. Then they preserve their teachings in such a way that countless more people will get to enlightenment after their death. So these are the three criteria of what make a Buddha a Buddha. They get to enlightenment by themselves. They dedicate the rest of their life to sharing their teachings, and countless people get to enlightenment. And they preserve their teachings in such a way that countless more people get to enlightenment. A Buddha is a living, breathing, walking example of his teachings. So you can get to enlightenment, but you're going to need the help of teachers and guides. It's just the natural law. It's just the way that it works. That it'd be wonderful if everybody could get to enlightenment by themselves, but it's just not possible because you haven't been able to cultivate the wisdom to be able to put it all together to get to enlightenment by yourself. There's one quality of mind that a Buddha has that the average person doesn't have. They have ability to remember countless details about their current life and their previous lives too. And because of that, they can put together all the wisdom that they need to be able to get to enlightenment. Where the average individual that can still get to enlightenment, they only have a limited memory, they have a limited capacity. This is why when you think back to your childhood, you just have spotty memories about the things that went on in your childhood. And now in the last maybe 5 years or so, you have more direct recall of what you're experiencing. So you'll be able to get to enlightenment, but you wouldn't be a Buddha, you wouldn't have attained Buddhahood, and you don't have Buddha nature. And a Buddha arising in the world is very rare. The last one that the world is currently aware of existed over 2,500 years ago. And you can see this in the actual words of the Buddha. He talks about it here, where he talks about the rare appearance of 5 treasures. There's these 5 things that the Buddha shares as very rare in the world. So he's talking to this student, which I can't necessarily pronounce his name. He says, "Student, the appearance of 5 treasures is rare in the world." What 5? The appearance of a Tathagata, an Arahant, a perfectly enlightened one, is rare in the world. So a Tathagata is a Buddha. The word Tathagata means the one who's discovered the truth, or the one who shares the truth. So you can see in that first line there that he's saying it's rare that a Buddha arises in the world. Well, if everybody is a Buddha, it wouldn't be so rare. So the Buddha wouldn't actually say this. So he goes on here and he talks about how a person who can teach the teachings and discipline proclaimed by the Tathagata is very rare in the world. It's very rare for somebody to be able to understand the teachings to the point of being able to teach them and guide other people to enlightenment. The third one, he says, when the teachings and discipline proclaimed by a Tathagata has been taught, a person who can understand it is rare in the world. Then the fourth one, he says, when the teachings and discipline proclaimed by a Tathagata has been taught, a person who can understand it and practice it in accordance with the teachings is rare in the world. And then the fifth one, a grateful and thankful person is rare in the world. The appearance of these 5 treasures is rare in the world. So sometimes when students are learning teachings from a teacher is sharing the teachings without any expectation of anything in return from their students. But sometimes to have gratitude and thankfulness towards their teacher can sometimes be rare. Someone who's going to make their way to enlightenment, they would have appreciation, gratitude, and respect towards their teacher. But sometimes you can see that people don't actually have this. And that's because they don't understand the teachings, that when they're disrespectful, when they're lacking politeness and kindness and friendliness, this is actually harming them. It's not harming other people. So here you can see how rare it is that a Buddha exists in the world. And this is through the words of the Buddha from the Pali Canon. And you can see the reference there. So everyone is not a Buddha. You can't attain Buddhahood. You don't have Buddha nature, but surely you can get to enlightenment, and that'll be plenty for you. You'll be plenty pleased with getting to enlightenment. So let me know if you guys have any questions here. This is everything that I have to share with you guys today. You're welcome to put those questions into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or at the temple, Wat Tong Yu in Chiang Mai. You guys can raise your hand along with anyone else in Zoom, and I can answer your questions if you'd like to speak your questions through the mic. So it looks like Rachel has a question here. I can see that all these misunderstandings are all connected with not understanding the truth of impermanence. Does this make sense? Yeah, that's part of it, right? That's the very beginning teaching of the Buddha, the universal truth of impermanence. So there's a certain aspect that people don't understand there. And there's other parts of it too, that the mind needs to cultivate wisdom. The highest, most ultimate truth of the Buddha is something called dependent origination. This is where you learn the 12 interlinking steps that is keeping your mind continuing to experience discontentedness over and over and over again, and it's experiencing rebirth over and over and over again. And you can independently verify this. The top line of this is called ignorance, or the unknowing of true reality, essentially a lack of wisdom. As long as there's a lack of wisdom in the mind's going to stay stuck in its continuous discontentedness over and over and over and over and over again. So in order to dismantle dependent origination and actually get to enlightenment, you need to cultivate wisdom. And there's nothing about any of these things that I've been sharing that is a cultivation of wisdom, where there's rites, rituals, ceremonies, and worship. That's why the Buddha didn't teach those things, because it doesn't lead to wisdom. And people aren't understanding his original teachings. So this is just the unfortunate nature of the Pali Canon, that for all these years, these 45 large volumes of books have really been hidden, not intentionally, but in order to print out the 45 volumes of books, it's about 3 months of the salary of an average Thai person. And you probably don't own any books that's 3 months of your salary. And because of that, these books have been really hidden away. And that's why the book series that I share is titled The Words of the Buddha, The Path to Enlightenment, Revealing the Hidden, because what we're doing is we're putting these teachings out and making them available for people at no cost by downloading it from our website, by taking it and go printing it, by getting printed versions at the temple, by just reimbursing us for the printing cost, or ordering it on Amazon. By consolidating it and then sharing it at no cost, we can get these teachings into the hands of many people. But for so long, these teachings haven't been accessible to people. Even the average temple doesn't have access to the teachings, and they don't necessarily study them. In the course of my life, I've visited over 200 temples, and I've only ever been to one temple that shares the original teachings of the Buddha. And that's less than 1%. So that shows you how rare it is that people are studying with the original words. So that's why so many misunderstandings continue to exist in the world. And the Buddha talks about this during his lifetime. He talks about this slow degrading of his teachings, getting to a low point. And he also talks about, in order to get to the first stage of enlightenment, you need to be having access to the true teachings. And that's why you're not interested in believing his teaching, but you learn them, you reflect on them to independently verify them, and you practice them. And that's what's going to lead to awakening of the mind. All right, great questions there. All right, Wat Tong Yu, you guys have a question?
So you're talking about making wise decisions to improve your life or attain like more wholesome states. Can you tell me more about making wise decisions and maybe give me an example of that?
Sure. So very basically, something like the 5 precepts that the Buddha teaches. This is all to help you understand this natural law of karma. The 5 precepts, the Buddha teaches you to live compassionately for the welfare of all living beings, that it would be unwise to kill and harm other beings. He teaches us about stealing and taking from people. He teaches us about having sexual misconduct, where we're causing harm through our sexual activity. He teaches about lying, having falsehoods. He teaches about taking substances that cause heedlessness. He teaches about how to speak with people in wise ways that are polite, kind, friendly, and respectful, for example. And he gives us the guidance of how to speak in ways based on these natural laws that wouldn't cause harm to others. So if you're out there, say, speaking with lies or slander or harsh speech or what we call frivolous speech, there's an underlying craving where the mind is longing and yearning and wanting things a certain way. And if you tell the truth, then you're not going to get what you want. So the mind will lie. But now people are going to discover your lies. So one of the wise decisions is to always speak the truth. And now people can see you as being dependable and reliable and trustworthy. And now you'll be able to have wonderful personal, professional relationships where you can grow your life. Or say slander or gossip. If you're gossiping and slandering about people, at the very least, those people are going to gossip and slander about you. Because when your back's turned, people are going to gossip and slander about you. But at the height of this, you can get beat up, you can even get murdered if you were to gossip and slander people. So this is like the cause and effect, or the action and result. If you've had harsh speech where your tone, tempo, and word choice is bitter and harsh and hostile, then you can see that it damages your relationships. So these are some of the wise decisions, and there's countless that the Buddha teaches you about these natural laws of how to develop harmonious relationships and go out into the world and make wise decisions so that you're not continuing to make unwise decisions that's producing unwholesome results or unwholesome karma. Okay, Janae's asking a question on Facebook. She says, would you agree that a Buddhist teacher is in fact rare? In my opinion, there's plenty of Buddhist teachers in the world, but the idea of someone teaching based on the original words of the Buddha and in English, that is somewhat rare. You don't really see that. As I mentioned, I've only ever been to one temple that's teaching with the original words of the Buddha, and that was actually in Thai that particular teacher was teaching. Haven't really known very many teachers, or really anyone at all, that's really sharing the original teachings based in the English language. So teachers are common. You'll see Buddhist teachers all over the place, but how closely they're practicing the teachings, how closely they understand them, and then they can communicate them to help others be able to understand them and experience the enlightened mental state, this is quite rare. And that's what the Buddha is teaching you. Okay, it looks like you guys have a question at Wat Tong Yu.
Thanks for your teaching. And I'm going to ask you one question about the practice. As you say that during your class, there are many people living in the room, and I was in the same situation before. When I teaching something, if someone leaves the classroom, I was interrupted, and I may feeling about disrespect. And I'm very curious about you teacher who was qualified for the teachings of Buddha. What do you think about this situation, and any different of your feeling you looking at this situation?
Sure. So I don't base my feelings on things that are happening in the world around me. The students who chose to leave, this is just impermanence, meaning things are constantly changing. The number of people who were in the classroom when we first started was one number, and then when we finish, there's going to be a different number. This is just impermanence, constant change. If my mind craves and clings and holds on and wants everybody who came from the beginning to stay there, then when people start leaving, my mind would be angry or sad or frustrated or irritated or annoyed. But I don't have that in my mind. I don't crave for all students to stay. If someone chooses to get up and leave, that's their choice. It doesn't mean that they're being disrespectful. It just means that they're choosing to leave. But oftentimes we have a perception. If you cling to your perception, if you hold on to this view or opinion that someone leaving during a class is disrespectful, then you will feel disrespected when people get up and leave. But that's not true reality. Maybe some people only plan to come for 30 minutes or an hour. Or maybe some people need to go eat. Maybe they didn't get any breakfast. Or maybe someone needs to go to the airport or something like this. There's any number of reasons why people might choose to leave. It's not disrespectful to leave. It's just impermanence. And as long as your mind isn't craving for people to be there permanently until the end of class, you can reside peaceful and joyful. So I see that plenty of people have left, and this isn't uncommon that people will come and go. But the people who do stick around and they do choose to learn, those are the individuals that are going to ultimately learn the teachings, develop them, and then get to enlightenment if they're training their mind closely. So each individual person needs to decide for themselves of what they would like to do in life. Sometimes when people start getting up and leaving, another person's mind might conform to that. And they may say, oh, other people are leaving, so maybe I might leave too. But for people who can see with clarity that what the teachings are being shared from the Buddha are the truth, they might choose to stick around and get deeper and deeper into the teachings. And then you can see more and more clearly by having done so, making the wise decision to learn these teachings. As you train your mind's going to get closer and closer to this peaceful and joyful mental state. Because you know in situations where you used to be angry and sad and frustrated and any of these other discontent feelings, and if you're learning and practicing these teachings and you're in that same situation and that's no longer occurring, you'll know that it's these teachings that have led you to that. So if people choose to get up and leave, that's their choice. They're not being disrespectful. They're just choosing on their own to do something else. And I don't have any expectation of somebody staying for any period of time. One of the things that the Buddha teaches is that if an individual understands even one sentence of his teachings, this is very good for their peacefulness and welfare for a really long time. So say somebody came to this class and all they understood was sprinkling water on you isn't going to lead to enlightenment. And now when they go to the temple, maybe they understand that and they can see that. Okay, great. That's very good for their welfare and peacefulness. Maybe they understand that cultivation of wisdom is what's going to lead to a better life. And maybe now they decide to start cultivating some wisdom. That's very good for their peacefulness and welfare. So you can get to a point where you don't hold on and with craving and clinging, so that when people are coming and going in and out of your classroom, that you don't experience painful feeling. But you're going to need to train your mind with the entire path to enlightenment. There's an entire path that the Buddha taught that is describing the path to enlightenment. So far, I just described the misunderstandings, but all the way back here at the beginning of the group learning program, I share something that's called the Eightfold Path. This is the path to enlightenment for all humans. So you're going to need to learn each one of these steps and train your mind. And as you train your mind with this Eightfold Path, that's what's going to lead to the liberation, where whether people get up and leave or no matter what's happening in your life, you can maintain your peace and your joy no matter what.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. Very wonderful question. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions, but let me just check in a couple places. All right, I'm not seeing any other questions anywhere. So what I'm going to do is just end our class today by thanking all of you guys for joining. Thank you, whether you're at the temple, you're online, or you're listening to this on the replay, or however you're digesting this content. Thank you for being interested to learn and practice the teachings of the Buddha. If you're interested in learning more, I have classes each Sunday, Wednesday, and Saturday. Those are the normal, regular classes. But I also have classes on Monday through Friday for various courses and retreats. You can see that on our website or on the bulletin board at the temple. You can see all the various classes and courses and retreats that I have. You can even get personal guidance. You can get access to the books and videos, podcasts. Everything's available to you at no cost. You just can reach out and decide to interact with the resources, and you can gradually learn what it takes to move the mind to the enlightened mental state. The next class, next Sunday, is going to be the frequently asked questions section of the book. You can read this ahead of time if you'd like. On Wednesday, I'm going to be doing meditation with students and then opening up to any and all questions that students have. And then on Friday at the temple, we're going to have game night. We have a fun game night. I'll be back in Chiang Mai by then, where we play board games with each other. It's a nice social event where people come together. So if you'd like to enjoy that, you're more than welcome to come to the temple at 6 p.m. on Friday. And then you'll see that we have a course next week, not this Monday, but the following Monday, where I'll be starting the Foundation and the Path to Enlightenment course. So again, thank you all for joining. I'll perhaps see you guys in a future class or a future event. Have a very lovely and wonderful rest of your day. We'll see you next time. Sawadee Kap.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To provide support for this podcast, visit patreon.com/support Buddha. To access more teachings, visit buddhadailywisdom.com. There, you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Remember to establish a daily, consistent meditation practice, along with learning and practicing these teachings. A well-developed meditation practice is the foundation in which to train the mind to attain enlightenment.